Okay, so I just finished this show called Mr. Plankton, and oh my gosh, I knew pretty much what was gonna happen at the end, but I still cried because it was actually really sad. So basically, it's about this guy that finds out he's terminally ill. He finds out within the first episode. He finds out he has 3 months to live. There's not really any leeway for him to survive. So you go into it pretty much knowing he's probably gonna die. And his whole thing is that he wants to find his sperm donor. So when he was a kid, but when he was 8 years old, his parents found out that he actually wasn't their son because so when they wanted to have kids, the dad had cancer, so they froze his sperm, and then when he was cancer free, when the wife got pregnant and they had their son, it turned out that the sperm that they used was some other random person's because the clinic got it mixed up. So basically, the wife ends up basically kind of losing her mind and she often disappears and ends up dying. And then the dad basically ignores the kid because he's like, oh, you're not my son. Stupid, but whatever. And so he ignores him for a couple of years. And then the kid eventually, the main character, he's like in high school and he ends up, he runs away and he ends up meeting this lady on like the brink of death. He hasn't like eaten in like 10 days and he meets this lady and she ends up helping him and gives him a job and whatever. So she kind of raises him, but she's only like 12 years older than him. So they don't have like a very big age gap. So the relationship is like a little bit undistinguished. It's like a little confusing at times, but for the most part, she's kind of like an older sister, mother figure kind of thing. So anyways, so then he's an adult. So now he finds out that he's going to die. Okay. And he had this ex that he loved a lot. They never say why they broke up, to be honest. They never give like a full explanation. And I'll say this before I get into any more of the plot. The male lead was confusing because there were so many situations where he did things or was like took a direction and like the actions that he did were like low-key kind of messed up, and I was like, he kind of just is a jerk, and you kind of never really grow out of that. But at the same time, he also is like a good person, but he's just weird. He does things where I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, that just seems crazy. Why are we okay with this? But also, I love the actor, so I could never hate this character. And also, the character goes through too much for me to ever hate him. I just feel bad for him the whole time. But like, I had a few moments here and there where I was like, what are you doing? Anyways, so he basically kidnaps his ex. That's one of the decisions he makes where I'm like, okay, that's weird. And he's basically like, I want you to go on this journey with me and I want to find my sperm donor. Here's the thing though. He does not tell her he's terminally ill. So she doesn't know until almost the end of the show. So keep that in mind. And so I don't think she even really knows technically why he like brought her along and like what he wants to do for a while. And so her backstory is she was going to get married to this guy, this very sweet man, which I'll get in talking to him because he's a whole nother part of the show. But she was going to marry this guy and they have like a very long lineage or whatever. And she finds out she actually can't have kids because she has premature menopause. Womp womp, and so she's like losing her mind like the day before the wedding because she's like, what am I gonna do, and she's also supposed to be pregnant because to make their wedding happen and make a way for them to be together, the fiance lied to his mom because that's like a whole thing. The mom is like kind of the matriarch of the family. She's very like overbearing and whatever. But he told the mom that she was pregnant. His fiance was pregnant so they could get married. So now not only is she not pregnant, but she actually can't even have kids. So it's like this crazy, she doesn't know what to do. So her ex shows up at her wedding, the day of her wedding, and essentially kidnaps her. And so then a lot of the show is her trying to get away. But also because she did date this man and like had a relationship with him, they have a weird dynamic where it's like she tries to get away, but then it's also like as she spends time with him, she's kind of starting to like soften towards him. And it's also confusing because like, okay, so the fiance, he's actually great. I loved him a lot. I did not expect to like him. I thought he was going to be a villain. And in fact, I thought he was going to be in the show for like an episode. He's in the entire show. He's a main character in the show. I did not realize that. He's super sweet. He's such a good guy. He's just genuinely a good person. And he genuinely loves her. And it like fully. It's never fully really explained if she has any feelings for him. It seems like she has a certain level of affection for him. But throughout the plot, the fiance is trying to catch up to them, almost does a couple of times, but it just, stuff keeps happening, It just keeps not working out. And eventually, around episode 5, because there's 10 episodes, she basically, okay, also, if you can hear barking, it's my dog. She's losing her mind. Anyways, so around episode 5, she kind of like fully is like, okay, I can't go back. She's like, the farther I get away from you, the more I can't get my way, like, I can't find my way back, because she realizes that she's like, I could maybe be happy marrying into your family, because she's an orphan, so she's never had a family. So that's a big part of her character, is like she wanted to marry into this guy's family to have a family. She's like, I don't want my happiness to eventually cause your unhappiness, because I think it was partly because she can't have kids, and that's what she was worried about. Again, for whatever reason, she kind of is just like, I'm like, it's not gonna work out between us. And around episode, again, 5, so now she's starting to kind of warm up back to the male lead, back to her ex, who she still loves. That's a whole thing. She still loves him, he still loves her. It's a whole thing. So the plot keeps going, it keeps going. And at one point, there's this like side plot where the main male lead is being chased by this group of gangsters. I'm genuinely not going to try to get into that because it doesn't end up mattering that much. Like, it does, but it doesn't. But he's being chased by these guys. So then him and the female lead end up escaping on this boat, because they're in like Busan, so they're by like the water. They escape in this boat, and then her fiance also jumps in the water, and so he ends up. They all three of them end up stranded on an island. Just trust it makes sense. They all end up stranded on an island, and it's a weird dynamic between the three of them, because she gets along, like the female lead gets along with both of them. She has chemistry with both of them. She has a different kind of relationship with both of them. It's just, it's an odd trio, but it weirdly kind of works. And then the male lead, like the main guy, so obviously he's dying, so that he keeps having like episodes and situations where he's like kind of can't see, and it's blurry or whatever, and he like collapses or has an issue or whatever. So him and the other guy, the fiance, like the two male leads, I guess, if you will, are together, like up on, because they're like, he didn't want him to be alone with the girl, so the fiance didn't. He's like, I don't want you to be alone with her, because now he knows that he's the ex. So he's like, you're gonna mess, whatever. So he takes him with him, and then the main male lead, like the main guy who's sick, ends up collapsing because he's ill, and he's like having like a seizure. And the fiance is a traditional like medicine, like holistics, is that the word? So he like does traditional medicine. So he has like acupuncture needles, and he ends up helping him, and it was one of the sweetest scenes I've ever seen in my whole life. It was so cute. I think one of the best parts about this show is the relationship between the trio, but specifically between the two guys, because they could have made them out to be mortal enemies where they hate each other the whole time. And obviously, yes, they don't like each other at the beginning, and they have issues in their random interactions that they have, but like they low-key start to like kind of become friends and like support each other. And it's such an odd thing, because you wouldn't think that would happen, but it does, and it works so well. And they also, the two actors, I don't know, they have great chemistry. Like they were just like, it was just so good with the two of them. So they're on the stranded island, and then one of the gang members ends up finding them. And so he tries to kill what's our main male lead, because of a past issue in the past that I'm not going to get into. Anyways, they're all three fighting, because first it's just the two guys, but then he collapses because, again, he's not okay. Like, his brain is like, he's like losing his mind, and he's like falling apart, dying. And in this scuffle between our three main characters, the fiance, the girl, and then the main male lead, and then the bad guy, the female lead ends up getting stabbed with a knife. And so she almost dies. That's a whole nother thing. So then she almost dies, and then her fiance, but basically at this point, her second ex, her ex-fiance, who she was going to marry, is kind of like taking care of her. But then they have like this kind of moment where like she's going to leave, and she knows she's going to leave, and it's kind of like they're done. Like, it's very ambivalent. How do you say that word? It's a very healthy breakup. It's not like, it's sad, but it's not like toxic. It's just like, she's like, I'm not, like, it's not gonna work out between us. Like, I have feelings for the other guy. She doesn't say she has feelings for the other guy to her ex-fiance, but like, I mean, you know. So then she goes off to find her ex-boyfriend, our main boy. And it's really stupid, because she ends up finding him, and he's been in this whole like depressive slump when he found out that she was like almost died, and so he was falling apart. But then he acts like all weird around her, and he's like, oh, like, we don't even need to be together, like, blah, 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 you just, blah, blah, blah. It's weird. Like, he's like, it says a bunch of really mean things to her to push her away, I guess. I don't know why. Again, this is coming into play of the male lead being stupid and doing things where I'm like, what are you doing? So he pushes her away, but then very shortly after, it's like immediately after, he's like, what am I doing? Goes and tries to find her, and then they end up kissing, and they end up reconciling and being together. So now they're together, okay? Track with me. They're together for not very long. And during this time, they're like trying to find the sperm donor, like from before, right? And they had found a couple candidates and it wasn't any of them. And so there's like another person. There's like one more person for them to try. And they're like, okay, let's try. So they go on this little journey together to go find this person, his potential father, biological father. And they get to this house in the middle of, what, I don't know, somewhere, nowhere. And she goes up alone. And he's like, okay, like, you start, like, you ask them, like, we're looking for his sperm donor, we're looking for his dad, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So the door opens, and it's her biological mom. So remember I said that she was an orphan, right? So she got abandoned by her mom back when she was born at an orphanage. And it turns out that the lady and the person that he brought her to was not his sperm donor, but it was her mom. So he was reuniting her with her mom. But then he leaves. Why? I don't know. I literally don't know. So he leaves and disappears for some reason. Oh, at some point also he had almost died and was in the hospital, and then she took him out of the hospital, and then it was a whole thing and whatever. It doesn't even end up mattering in this plot because I forgot about that. I'm going to be so honest. I completely forgot about that. What ended up happening? I don't remember what came of it, but whatever. I think that was before he brought her. That was before they were, like, back together, I think. Or no, it was after they were back together. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm not starting this video over, so sorry if the timeline gets a little confusing. All you need to know is that he ends up abandoning her again. Gosh. At this point of the show, it was like episode 8. I was like, what are we doing? Like, why do you keep abandoning this girl? Like, why do you keep leaving? Like, for what? And he's, like, all torn up about it, too. So, whatever. So, he, during this time, had called her ex-fiance. So, then it's him and the ex-fiance together randomly. And they're, like, traveling together. And they, like, bond a bunch. And it's super cute. But it's also, like, super random. So, anyways, all that to say, they all end up back in Seoul, Korea. So, they end up back at the capital. They end up back in Seoul. And him and her get reunited and they work it out, they talk it out, and it's fine, I guess, whatever. So now they're like still together at this point. And then, what happens? I'm just trying to remember because I watched all of this show basically in like 2 days. So I'm trying to like not get confused about the plot. So he ends up, okay, so they're like all together. All the characters are kind of together. They're hanging out. They're having a good time. And then he has an episode, I guess is what you could call it, where he's like losing his mind. And he goes to find not actually his dad, but at this point, the only father that he's known, which was the guy that abandoned him back when he was a teenager. So he goes to find him and he's determined to find him. And so she freaks out because he like disappears and she sees him leaving a taxi and she's like, oh my God, where'd he go? But she ends up finding him because she finds him at his dad's house. But he has a reunion with his dad. It's actually quite literally so sad and so sweet. And they don't ever talk nor really have any conversation. They just like hug and cry. And it was really actually very sweet. And then she finds him, okay, at his dad's house and they talk or whatever. And then they do this whole cute little thing where it's like, now it's your turn to kidnap me. I don't know. So then they leave together again. Okay, so now they're on a journey. They're on this trip. They're just kind of driving, whatever. They're wandering. They're aimless, whatever. They end up in somewhere where there's snow. And then they're like hanging out and like playing in the snow and having a fun time. And then he dies. Wish I was kidding. He dies. That's how he dies. So the first scene I think it's one of the first scenes we see in the first episode is the last scene. So it's one of those shows where they show you what happens. But to be fair, when you watch the show, you're like, okay, well, that could have happened or that could have been an imagination. We don't know. That is actually the scene. So the last thing that he sees is her. And he even says that like something like, the something like the fact that I'm seeing your face for like that's the last thing that I see means I lived a good life or something like that. Heartbreaking. Expected, but heartbreaking. So yeah, he dies, and that's how the show ends. Everyone else said they'd kind of tied up their other ends with like other storylines with other people and other characters that were in the show. They kind of tied them up. And the fiance ends up living a good life. He's off exploring, doing his own thing, even though it was it's hard to explain unless you watch the show to like see cuz none of the relationships in the show are like easy to explain. They're all complicated and weird and sweet and odd and heartbreaking and like it's hard to explain. So he ends up being fine, whatever. So yeah, okay, here's what I want to say. The show was amazing. It's one of the best K-dramas I've watched in that it's one of the most original shows I've ever watched. I've never seen a show like this. I've never watched a show with this kind of plot. It's crazy. My complaint about the show is that he dies. I knew he was going to die, but good lord, it was sad. Also, on a fully like operational level, you're telling me this girl's man dies in the middle of the woods in a snow pile, just in the snow, and what is she supposed to do? Is she gonna bring his body back? Is she gonna just sit with his dead body and then just be like, oh, I bury you here? Like, there's no explanation as to how it ends. Like, you don't even know how anything goes on beyond that in her life. And the other thing that I kind of had a little bit of a hard time with was he kind of, as I said, seemed like a little bit of a terrible person. So it was a little bit weird at times how quickly she'd forgive him. But I guess that was just kind of his character. Like, that's just kind of how he was. And that's kind of how she was. And that was just, like, how they were. Like, that was just the show. So I guess it makes sense. Okay. All that to say, great show, great chemistry, great acting. The main actor is one of the hottest men I've ever seen. This might be my favorite role he's been in. I was stunned by his acting. I was stunned by the female lead's acting. The fiance, amazing actor. Just 10 out of 10. Everyone was slaying in their roles. Like, everyone was picked perfectly. They were cast perfectly. I wasn't sure how I felt about the female lead because I've seen her in a few shows, but I was like, she's incredible. She's a great actress. She was very lovable, very cute in this role. She has a crazy range because she was in Squid Games. She's the girl that is friends with the main female lead who, like the girl with like the really short hair who dies in the like, when they're playing like the marble games. I don't, whatever. She's that girl. She was great. Yeah, it was great. Okay, now here's a side plot I want to talk about that we never, ever talked about. We never tied it up. It was the most random thing I've ever seen, and I wish they would have explained it. I don't know why they didn't. So, when the fiance is trying to find her, he's accompanied by this guy that is supposedly this, like, he seems kind of like a bodyguard, secret agent kind of thing. I don't know. He's like this guy. He's in, like, sunglasses and a leather jacket that the fiance's mom had called and was like, you need to go find my son. So they end up like teaming up though to find his fiance, like the female leader or whatever. So then it's these two guys traveling by themselves. Okay, so the one guy, the bodyguard man, he doesn't talk. He only talks at the last episode. Like, he's silent the whole time. There's a scene though that was so purposeful that I just can't figure out why it was in the show. Like, because it didn't lead to anything. So him and the fiance are there. They're outside, they're talking. And the bodyguard, I'm just going to call him bodyguard, he starts to he's like eating something and he doesn't like choke, but he's like kind of coughing, like he's just like not whatever, doing well. And so the fiance guy is like, because he's does acupuncture, he like grabs his hand and he's like feeling, hold on, I have to like show you what I mean. So he like takes his hand, right? And then he takes his hand and he's kind of like touching like pressure points or whatever. And he's like kind of massaging his hand or like feeling his hand or whatever. You're just yapping the whole time. And you're watching the bodyguard and you're like, why is he like affected by this? What the heck? Like what is going on? And then the fiance guy is like, he's like touching his ears and like touching his arms and stuff. Not in like a weird way. He's just like, I don't know, like checking him, like making sure he's okay, because he's like, oh, you need to, everything's out of order, like, oh, like your body's all messed up, blah blah blah, just going on and on and on, just talking. But you can see that the fiance is affected, or not fiance, the bodyguard is affected by it. You can see that he's like bothered or flustered and weird. And so then he just like abruptly leaves, right, and gets up and he goes to the car, and then he's like touching his hands, like all like nervous and like uncomfortable. And I was like, so he's in love with the fiance. I was like, he loves this man. Like, like the bodyguard likes him. Like, what? Nothing comes of it. Nothing comes of it. And there's another scene too where like there's like this weird moment between the two of them, and I was like, why are we not following through with this weird tension chemistry moment that's like not? And they never ever explain it. They never give any context as to what was happening. They never explain to us why he was like affected by him, like why it seemed like he was like in love with him. Don't know. They never explain. I need someone to talk about that scene though and give me some context, because I'm like, what was the point of having these scenes? Because it was just too intentional to not mean anything. But I can't figure out what it would have meant in the general plot of the show, because there's no follow through on it. So I was like, what was the point of that? Anyways, that was one of the biggest mysteries of the show. I don't know what it meant. I have no idea. Yeah, that's pretty much my review. Great show. I would recommend it. Honestly, it's super sad, but it's really good. It's a really well-made, well-acted, just creative plot that I've never really seen before. The characters have good chemistry. Everyone's just like really good at the role that they're in. Yeah, I'd recommend it, but be prepared to cry because it is sad. Also, I know I already said this, but like, I was just like, I knew the male lead could act. I knew he was a good actor, but there is something about this show, guys. I hope he gets an award for this show, because man, he was just on point with like every single thing. I was just so impressed by him. Yep. That's all I have to say. Watch it. Don't watch it. Cry. Don't cry. You know? I cried. I didn't think I was going to, because I knew he died, but I was like, I still cried. Anyways, okay, that's all I have to say. Bye-bye, bye-bye.